For centuries, people believed Ashkenazi Jews came from ancient Israelites. But what if history isn't that simple? Some say they traveled from Israel to Europe. Others believe they came from an entirely different place. DNA studies, forgotten kingdoms, and hidden history tell a story you won't expect. Who are they really? Are they the chosen people? To uncover the full truth, watch till the end and like this video, because the real answer might shock you. For centuries, history told us that Ashkenazi Jews descended from the ancient Israelites. Their roots, their traditions, their very identity, woven into the fabric of the Middle East. But what if science tells a different story? DNA, the silent storyteller, holds secrets deeper than any book, any legend. And when geneticists began decoding the Ashkenazi ancestry, they found something astonishing. At first glance, genetic studies supported the traditional belief: Ashkenazi Jews do share DNA markers with Middle Eastern populations, including Sephardic Jews and some Arab groups. But there was something odd, a pattern that didn't fully match. If they had purely Middle Eastern origins, why did their genetic code tell a different tale? The answer was buried in their maternal lineage. Studies found that while Ashkenazi men carried DNA linked to the Levant, nearly 80% of their maternal ancestry traced back to Europe. This raised a shocking question. Were the early Ashkenazi Jews mostly Middle Eastern men who married European women? If so, how much of their bloodline still connected to the Israelites? Then came an even more controversial idea. Some researchers believe that a large part of Ashkenazi ancestry could come not from Israel, but from an empire that vanished nearly 1,000 years ago, the Khazar Empire. The Khazars were a powerful Turkic people who ruled over vast lands between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Historical records suggest that in the 8th to 10th century, their king and much of their nobility converted to Judaism. If true, could their descendants be the real ancestors of Ashkenazi Jews? Genetic studies are divided. Some researchers claim they found traces of Central Asian and Turkic genes in Ashkenazi populations, something unexpected if their roots were purely Middle Eastern. Others argue that the genetic footprint of Khazars is weak and that Ashkenazi Jews still have a strong Semitic origin. But here's the real question. If their DNA isn't fully Middle Eastern, does it challenge their claim to the land of Israel? For many, history is not just about genetics. It's about faith, culture, and resilience. The Ashkenazi Jews endured centuries of persecution, exile, and struggle, holding on to their traditions through it all. Their language, their customs, their prayers, deeply tied to Judaism. So, what matters more? The bloodline or the belief? If identity is only about DNA, then does that mean ancient Israelites are the only ones who can claim the land? Or is being chosen about something far greater? Faith, tradition, and survival. One thing is certain: science alone cannot tell the full story. The truth of who the Ashkenazi Jews are is not written in just their genes, but in the thousands of years of history, struggle, and devotion that shaped them. Want to go deeper into this mystery? Keep watching, because the next revelation might change everything you thought you knew. For centuries, the story of the Ashkenazi Jews was believed to be simple. They were exiled Israelites who migrated to Europe, carrying their traditions, faith, and history across generations. But then came the DNA studies, revealing a mystery no one expected. While their paternal lineage pointed to the Middle East, their maternal ancestry told a different story, one that led to an empire lost in time, an empire that some say changed Jewish history forever. Deep in the heart of Eurasia, between the Black Sea and the Caspian, once stood a kingdom unlike any other, the Khazar Empire. In the 8th century, while Europe was drowning in chaos and the Middle East was shaped by Islamic expansion, the Khazars controlled vital trade routes, ruling with power and wealth. They were warriors, merchants, and strategists, standing at the crossroads of civilizations. Then, something happened, something historians still debate today. The Khazars, who were originally a Turkic people, converted to Judaism. Not just a few nobles or traders. Many believe the entire ruling class and possibly large portions of the population embrace the faith. But here's where the mystery begins. Did these Khazar converts vanish into history? Or did they become a major part of the Ashkenazi Jewish lineage? Some researchers argue that after the fall of the Khazar Empire in the 10th century, its Jewish population migrated westward, blending into Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. If this theory is true, it would mean that many Ashkenazi Jews aren't descended from the Israelites of ancient times, but from a Turkic kingdom that no longer exists. Think about it. What if the chosen people were actually warriors from a lost empire? This theory challenges everything, from religious beliefs to historical identity. If Ashkenazi Jews have deep Khazar roots, then their claim to Israel becomes far more complex than history suggests. Many scholars reject the Khazar theory, arguing that while some Khazars may have converted to Judaism, their numbers were too small to significantly influence Ashkenazi ancestry. Genetic studies, though revealing some Central Asian traces, overwhelmingly show that Ashkenazi Jews have strong Middle Eastern ancestry, particularly from paternal lineage. If the Khazars had merged into the Jewish population, wouldn't their genetic footprint be stronger? Furthermore, the language Ashkenazi Jews developed, Yiddish, is rooted in German, Hebrew, and Slavic words, not the Turkic dialects the Khazars spoke. If they truly shaped the Ashkenazi identity, wouldn't their language have reflected it? So, who were the Ashkenazi Jews, the lost children of Israel, or the heirs of an ancient Turkic empire? Or is the truth something even more complicated? One thing is clear. History is never as simple as it seems. Nations rise and fall. Bloodlines mix, and identities evolve. The answer may not lie in DNA alone, but in the culture, traditions, and unbreakable faith that have kept Jewish identity alive for thousands of years. Want to uncover even more shocking secrets? Keep watching, because the next revelation might change history as we know it. History leaves behind clues, not always in stone or scripture, but in the very words people speak, the traditions they hold, and the culture they pass down through generations. We've uncovered the DNA mysteries, debated the Khazar theory, and questioned where Ashkenazi Jews truly come from. But sometimes, history whispers its secrets through language and culture, and what it reveals is nothing short of astonishing. Imagine being able to trace a people's journey through time just by listening to the words they speak. Yiddish, the historic language of Ashkenazi Jews, is one such living map, a fusion of Hebrew, German, Slavic, and even some Romance languages. But here's the mystery. If Ashkenazi Jews were purely of Middle Eastern descent, shouldn't their language have remained closer to Hebrew or Aramaic? Instead, Yiddish developed in medieval Germany, picking up German sentence structures and vocabulary while retaining Hebrew script and religious expressions. This linguistic blend supports the idea that Ashkenazi Jews lived in Europe for centuries, absorbing and adapting to local cultures. But does it prove they didn't originate from the Israelites? Not necessarily. Languages evolve when people migrate. But the question remains, how much of their culture stayed true to its ancient roots? Beyond language, another powerful clue lies in religious customs. Ashkenazi Jews follow unique traditions, sometimes different from Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, who have stronger connections to Middle Eastern practices. Ashkenazi pronunciation of Hebrew differs significantly from the Sephardic and ancient forms. Passover traditions vary, with Ashkenazim avoiding certain foods Sephardic Jews permit. Wedding and mourning rituals have European influences. But one thing remains unchanged: the Torah, the prayers, and the core beliefs that have survived thousands of years. Despite cultural adaptations, the faith remained untouched. So what does this tell us? Were the Ashkenazi Jews shaped more by European surroundings, or did they simply preserve their faith while adapting to new lands? If Ashkenazi Jews were originally Khazars, as some claim, shouldn't their customs and language have been influenced by Turkic culture? Yet we find little evidence of that in their songs, prayers, or traditions. Instead, Their religious foundation remains deeply Jewish, just with European adaptations. This raises an even bigger question. If they truly weren't Israelites, why would they have kept Jewish customs, endured persecution, and remained devoted to their faith for centuries? At the end of the day, identity is more than just DNA or history. It's the stories people tell, the prayers they recite, and the traditions they refuse to let go of. So, do language and culture prove or disprove Ashkenazi Jews' connection to the Israelites? Or do they show a people who, no matter where they traveled, never let go of who they were? The mystery isn't over yet, because in the next section, we dive into the most debated question of all. What do religious scriptures say about being the chosen people? Keep watching, because this may be the biggest revelation of all. History can be rewritten. Science can be debated. But faith? Faith is something that has survived exile, persecution, and time itself. We've explored DNA mysteries, the Khazar theory, and cultural evolution, each raising more questions about the true origins of Ashkenazi Jews. But perhaps the most important question isn't about genetics or migration at all. Because long before DNA tests and historical debates, there was one belief that defined a people. Who are the chosen ones? To understand this, we must go back to where it all began. The Torah, the foundation of Jewish identity. The Torah tells a story of a divine promise, a covenant between God and Abraham. A promise that Abraham's descendants would be blessed, multiplied, and given the land of Israel. This covenant didn't depend on power, wealth, or military strength. It was based on one thing: faith. The Israelites weren't the largest or strongest people, but they were chosen to carry God's message. Through generations of slavery, exile, and suffering, they held on to this belief with unshakable devotion. But here's the question: does being chosen depend on a bloodline, or is it something deeper? Rabbinical scholars have debated this for centuries. Some believe that being Jewish is an unbreakable bloodline, passed from mother to child. According to Jewish law, halakha, a person born to a Jewish mother is Jewish, no matter where they are, no matter their DNA. But others argue that being Jewish is not just about ancestry, but about acceptance of the faith. After all, history is filled with converts, lost tribes, and migrations. Some of the greatest Jewish figures, including Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David, were not born Jewish, but became part of the people through faith. So if the Khazar theory were true, would it change anything? If a kingdom converted centuries ago and embraced Judaism, does that make them less Jewish? Or does the act of choosing faith make them just as much part of the chosen people? Does the bloodline even matter? Here's where the debate gets even more interesting. The Torah doesn't say that being chosen means having pure Israelite blood. Instead, it speaks of following God's commandments, keeping the faith, and living by the Torah. Some scholars believe that the Jewish people have survived not because of genetics, but because of their unwavering connection to God's covenant. The Jewish identity is one of endurance, of keeping the faith alive even when everything else is lost. And history proves this. The Jewish people have faced countless attempts to erase them: Babylonian exile, Roman destruction, the Holocaust, yet they still stand. Not because of blood, but because of belief. So now, let's return to the question: are Ashkenazi Jews the real chosen people? If being chosen is about DNA alone, then only those with pure Israelite blood would qualify. But if being chosen is about faith, struggle, and carrying the covenant forward, then Ashkenazi Jews, regardless of Khazar ancestry or European influence, have proven their devotion through thousands of years. Maybe the real test of being chosen isn't about where you come from, but what you do with the faith you inherit. And that brings us to the final, most important question. What does this all mean for the future? Stay with us, because the next revelation might be the most surprising of all. We have traveled through centuries of history, explored DNA mysteries, questioned the Khazar theory, and examined the role of faith, culture, and survival. And yet, after everything we've uncovered, one thing is clear. This mystery cannot be solved by science alone. Because in the end, the true story of the Ashkenazi Jews is not just about genetics, migration, or lost kingdoms. It is about identity. It is about faith. It is about resilience. So, what does history really tell us? And more importantly, what does it all mean? When we looked at DNA, we saw both Middle Eastern and European influences. The paternal lineage pointed to the ancient Israelites, while the maternal side carried European traces, leading to questions about migration and conversion. Then, we uncovered the Khazar theory, which challenges the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are directly descended from the Israelites. If true, this would mean their ancestry is more complex than most believe. But does that change their identity? Or does it prove that faith can be passed down just as powerfully as blood? Culture told us another story. The Ashkenazi Jews may have absorbed influences from Europe, but their traditions, prayers, and beliefs remain deeply tied to Jewish heritage. They followed the Torah. They kept their faith through exile, persecution, and survival. And despite living far from the land of Israel for centuries, they never stopped longing for it. So, what does this mean? Does identity come from blood, or does it come from devotion? For thousands of years, Jews have called themselves the chosen people. But chosen for what? Was it about having a pure bloodline, or was it about carrying the covenant forward? The Torah speaks of a promise between God and Abraham, a covenant that would pass through generations. But throughout history, Jewish identity has never been based on blood alone. It has been based on faith, laws, traditions, and an unwavering connection to something greater. If the Khazar theory were true, would it make Ashkenazi Jews any less Jewish? If Jewish people throughout history converted others, married outsiders, and built new communities, does that mean they lost their connection to the original Israelites? Or does it mean something even more powerful, that Jewish identity is not just inherited, but lived and upheld? No DNA test can measure faith. No history book can calculate the pain, the struggle, and the sacrifices made to keep Judaism alive. The Jewish people were exiled, enslaved, persecuted, and nearly wiped out multiple times. Yet, they still stand. If identity were just about genetics, then many of the greatest Jewish figures in history wouldn't be considered Jewish at all. Converts like Ruth, kings like David, scholars like Onkelos, all embraced Judaism not through birth, but through faith. Now, after everything we have explored, one final question remains. Does it really matter where Ashkenazi Jews came from? If being the chosen people means having a pure Israelite bloodline, then history may have complicated the answer. But if being chosen means carrying forward a faith that has survived against all odds, then Ashkenazi Jews have already proven themselves. Perhaps the real chosen people are not those with the right ancestry, but those who have kept the faith alive despite centuries of struggle. So now, the final question is for you. What do you think? Are Ashkenazi Jews the real chosen people, or is history more complicated than we ever imagined? Subscribe and watch until the end. This is just the beginning of uncovering history's greatest mysteries. If you found this video fascinating, make sure to like this video to support more content like this. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into history. Comment below. Let us know what you think about this mystery. Watch the full video till the end, because history is